The clatter of silverware against porcelain had become white noise to Marcus Hartwell, but the sound of his daughter's labored breathing, that never faded into the background. He sat across from Emma in the corner booth of Sullivan's Diner, watching her struggle with the simple act of holding a fork, her small hands trembling from the cerebral palsy that had shaped every moment of her 8 years of life. The other diners pretended not to notice, their eyes darting away with that uncomfortable mixture of pity and relief that it wasn't their child, their burden, their heartbreak. Marcus had grown accustomed to those looks, had built walls around his heart so high that nothing could scale them anymore. He had money, more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, but he would have traded every cent, every stock, every property deed for just one day where his daughter could run freely, laugh without gasping, live without pain. The irony wasn't lost on him that he could buy anything except the one thing that mattered. His pharmaceutical empire had made him wealthy beyond measure, yet all the research grants, all the experimental treatments, all the specialists flown in from across the globe couldn't give Emma what she deserved. He'd lost his wife to grief 3 years ago, not to death, but to something worse. Catherine had simply walked away one Tuesday morning, leaving a note on the kitchen counter that read, "I can't watch her suffer anymore. I'm sorry." The divorce papers arrived a week later. Marcus never tried to find her. How could he blame someone for breaking under a weight he himself could barely carry? Tonight was supposed to be special. Emma had asked to go out for dinner, a rare request from a child who usually preferred the safety and privacy of their sprawling estate. Marcus had chosen Sullivan's precisely because it wasn't the kind of place where he'd be recognized. No pretentious waiters, no photographers lurking for a candid shot of the billionaire and his disabled daughter. Just a simple neighborhood diner with checkered floors and the smell of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The waitress who approached their table was young, probably mid-20s, with tired eyes that suggested she'd seen more of life's harsh realities than someone her age should have. Her name tag read, Sophie, and there was a small stain on her apron that she'd tried unsuccessfully to scrub away. Marcus barely glanced at her as he ordered, his attention fixed on Emma, who was struggling to communicate what she wanted to eat. The words came out garbled, her tongue not cooperating with her brain's commands, and Marcus felt the familiar knife twist of helplessness in his gut. "I'll have the grilled chicken," he said curtly, ready to order for Emma as he always did, ready to make decisions for her because the world moved too fast to wait for a little girl who processed everything through a fog of neurological misfires. But Sophie didn't walk away. She crouched down beside Emma's wheelchair, bringing herself to eye level with his daughter. "Hi there, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that Marcus hadn't heard directed at Emma from a stranger in years. "What sounds good to you tonight?" Emma's eyes lit up, that rare spark of joy that made Marcus's chest tighten. She tried to speak, the sounds coming out in broken syllables, her whole body tensing with the effort. Most people would have nodded politely and looked to Marcus for translation. Sophie didn't. She waited, patient as a saint, her hand gently resting on the edge of Emma's wheelchair. Macaroni," Emma finally managed, the word exploding from her lips with triumphant difficulty. "Macaroni and cheese." Sophie's face broke into a genuine smile. "That's my favorite too. Do you want the kind with the breadcrumb topping or the extra creamy one?" Marcus watched, stunned, as this stranger engaged his daughter in a full conversation, never once looking to him for help, never showing the slightest hint of impatience or discomfort. Emma was beaming, pointing at the menu with her shaking finger, and Sophie was nodding along like this was the most important decision of the day. When the food arrived 20 minutes later, Marcus's chicken sat untouched as he watched Emma struggle with her macaroni. The tremors were worse today, probably from the excitement, and each attempt to guide the spoon to her mouth ended with cheese sauce on her chin, her shirt, the table. He was reaching for the napkin, preparing to help as he'd done thousands of times before, when Sophie reappeared. "Mind if I join you ladies for a minute?" she asked, and before Marcus could respond, she was sliding into the booth next to Emma. "You know what? Eating macaroni is an art form, and I happen to be an expert." What happened next would replay in Marcus's mind for years to come. Sophie didn't grab the spoon from Emma. She didn't take over. Instead, she wrapped her hand gently around Emma's trembling one, steadying it, guiding it with a patience that seemed infinite. Together, they brought the spoon to Emma's mouth. Then again, and again. Sophie kept up a running commentary, Silly jokes, stories about her own clumsy eating disasters, questions about Emma's favorite colors and movies, treating his daughter not like a broken thing to be pitied, but like a person worthy of time and attention and dignity. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the dam he'd built around his emotions. He watched his daughter laugh, actually laugh, at one of Sophie's terrible puns, watched her eat an entire meal with more joy than he'd seen in months, watched a minimum wage waitress give his child something all his money couldn't buy, the simple gift of being seen. When the meal was finished, Sophie wiped Emma's face with gentle care, told her she was the best dinner companion she'd had all week, and stood up. "You've got a beautiful smile," she said to Emma. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Marcus sat frozen as Sophie walked away to tend to other tables. His daughter was glowing, humming to herself, and he realized with a sharp pang that he'd been so focused on her limitations that he'd forgotten to see her possibilities. This stranger had shown him in 30 minutes what he'd lost sight of over 8 years, that Emma wasn't her disability. She was a little girl who deserved to be treated like one. He left a $500 tip, but returned the next night. And the night after that. Always requesting Sophie's section, always watching her interact with Emma with that same unfailing kindness. On the 4th visit, he asked her to join them for coffee after her shift. "Why?" she asked, direct and unafraid despite knowing exactly who he was by now. "The internet made such secrets impossible to keep." "Because my daughter lights up around you in a way I haven't been able to make her light up in years," he said honestly. "And because I want to offer you a job." Sophie laughed. "I'm not qualified to work for a pharmaceutical company, Mr. Hartwell. I'm not offering you a job at my company. I'm offering you a job with Emma. As her companion, her teacher, her friend. Name your price." Sophie looked at Emma, then back at Marcus, and something shifted in her expression. "I don't want your money," she said quietly. "But I'd love to spend time with Emma. How about this, I'll come by twice a week, on my days off. Free of charge. Because that little girl deserves someone who shows up not because they're paid to, but because they want to." Marcus felt the dam crack wider. "Why would you do that?" Sophie's tired eyes grew distant. "Because 5 years ago, my little brother died from leukemia. He was 7. And in his last weeks, when most people couldn't stand to be around him because his sickness made them uncomfortable, there was one nurse who treated him like he was just a regular kid. She played video games with him, told him jokes, made his last days bearable." Her voice broke. "I never got to thank her. But maybe I can pay it forward." That was how Sophie Matthews became part of their lives. She never accepted payment, though Marcus set up a scholarship fund in her brother's name that would put her through nursing school, something he did quietly, anonymously, because she was too proud to accept charity. Over the following months, Emma blossomed under Sophie's attention. She started physical therapy with renewed determination, started speaking up more, started believing in herself. And Marcus, the man who thought his heart had calcified beyond repair, found himself learning how to be a father instead of just a provider. 1 year later, on a sunny afternoon in that same diner, Marcus asked Sophie to marry him. Not because he needed someone to care for Emma, but because she'd taught him how to care again, how to see light in the darkness, how to find hope in the smallest acts of kindness. Emma was their flower girl, rolling down the aisle in her decorated wheelchair, beaming with pride. The meal that changed everything hadn't been the food on those plates. It had been the generosity of a young woman who understood that the most valuable things in life can't be purchased, they can only be given freely, from one human heart to another. And sometimes, the people who have the least to give materially are the ones who give the most where it truly counts.